First contact. The skies above New York City erupted with light as the alien ship descended through the atmosphere. Its sleek, silver form gleamed in the afternoon sun, casting long shadows over the awestruck crowds below. On the observation deck of the United Nations building, world leaders and dignitaries held their breath, a mix of excitement and apprehension evident on their faces. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Earth's leading xenobiologist, stood at the forefront of the welcoming committee. Her heart raced with anticipation as she watched the ship's graceful descent. After years of searching the stars for signs of intelligent life, humanity was about to make first contact. The ship touched down in the specially prepared landing zone in Central Park. A hush fell over the gathered crowds as a shimmering portal appeared on the side of the vessel. Moments later, three tall, slender figures emerged, their iridescent skin reflecting the sunlight in mesmerizing patterns. Elena stepped forward, her voice steady despite her nerves. On behalf of the people of Earth, welcome to our world. We are honored by your presence and eager to begin a new era of interstellar cooperation. The tallest of the aliens inclined its head in a gesture of respect. When it spoke, its voice was melodious, almost musical. Greetings, people of Earth. We are the Zarthani, and we come in peace and friendship. We have long observed your world from afar, and we are pleased to finally meet you face to face. As the formal introductions continued, one of the younger Zarthani scientists, Lyra, found her attention wandering. Her large, multifaceted eyes darted from person to person, taking in the diversity of human appearances with fascination. She had studied the transmitted data on human biology, but seeing the variations in skin color, hair texture, and facial features in person was utterly captivating. Lyra's gaze settled on Elena, noting the scientist's confident posture and the intelligence gleaming in her eyes. As if sensing the alien's scrutiny, Elena turned and met Lyra's gaze. The two shared a moment of mutual curiosity before the formalities demanded their attention once more. In the days that followed, the Zarthani delegation moved into a specially prepared compound near the United Nations. Lyra threw herself into her role as a cultural liaison, eager to learn everything she could about humanity. She spent hours poring over Earth's history, art, and scientific achievements, marveling at the ingenuity and resilience of this young species. One afternoon, as Lyra was exploring the compound's extensive library, she stumbled upon a section dedicated to human biology and reproduction. Her curiosity piqued. She began to read, her eyes widening with each new piece of information. The Zarthani reproduced through a complex process of energy transfer and genetic recombination, a method that was clinical and detached. But humans reproduced through physical intimacy, a process that seemed to involve not just bodies, but emotions as well. The concept was so foreign, so intriguing, that Lyra found herself unable to look away from the texts. "Find anything interesting?" a voice asked, startling Lyra from her studies. She looked up to see Elena standing in the doorway, an amused smile playing on her lips. Lyra felt a strange warmth in her cheeks, a sensation she couldn't quite identify. "Dr. Rodriguez," Lyra said, her voice carrying a hint of embarrassment. "I was just researching human biology. It's fascinating, truly, so different from our own methods of reproduction." Elena moved closer, her eyes sparkling with interest. "I'd love to hear about Zarthani reproduction sometime. Perhaps we could exchange information. I'm sure we both have much to learn from each other." Lyra nodded eagerly. "I would like that very much. Human reproduction, in particular, seems so complex, not just biologically, but emotionally as well. How do you manage it?" Elena laughed, a warm, rich sound that made Lyra feel strangely light. "Well, that's a complicated question with no easy answer, but I'd be happy to discuss it with you in more detail. Maybe over coffee. It's a popular human beverage for social interactions." "Coffee," Lyra repeated, testing the unfamiliar word. "Yes, I would like to try coffee and learn more about human reproduction." As they left the library together, Lyra couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. She had come to Earth to study humanity, but she was quickly realizing that there was so much more to learn than what could be found in books. The complexities of human emotions, relationships, and reproduction were a mystery waiting to be unraveled, and Lyra was determined to understand it all. Little did she know that her quest for knowledge would lead her down a path that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, the species, and the nature of love itself. As she followed Elena to the compound's cafeteria, Lyra felt the first stirrings of something new and exhilarating, the beginning of an adventure that would change her life forever. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as Lyra and Elena settled into a quiet corner of the cafeteria. Lyra watched with fascination as Elena added cream and sugar to her cup, explaining the various ways humans customize their coffee. "So, Lyra," Elena began, taking a sip of her drink, "what aspects of human reproduction are you most curious about?" Lyra's multifaceted eyes shimmered with interest. "The emotional component intrigues me the most. For the Zarthani, reproduction is a purely biological process, but humans seem to attach great significance to the act. Why is that?" Elena considered the question thoughtfully. "Well, for humans, reproduction isn't just about creating offspring. It's often an expression of love, intimacy, and emotional connection. The physical act can be deeply pleasurable, but it's the emotional bond that many humans find most fulfilling." Lyra leaned forward, her iridescent skin reflecting the soft cafeteria lighting. "Love," she said, testing the word. "We have a concept similar to affection, but from what I've read, human love seems far more intense. How does it feel?" Elena smiled, a hint of wistfulness in her eyes. "Love is complex. It can be exhilarating and terrifying all at once. It can make you feel invincible one moment and vulnerable the next. But when it's reciprocated, it can be the most beautiful experience in the universe." As Elena spoke, Lyra felt a strange flutter in her chest, a sensation entirely foreign to her Zarthani physiology. She dismissed it as a reaction to the caffeine in her coffee, but couldn't shake the feeling that something profound was happening. Their conversation continued late into the evening, touching on topics ranging from human courtship rituals to the biological intricacies of human reproduction. Lyra absorbed every word, her respect and admiration for humanity growing with each new piece of information. As they parted ways for the night, Lyra found herself looking forward to their next meeting with an eagerness that surprised her. She had come to Earth to study humanity, but she was beginning to suspect that her research would lead her to discoveries far beyond what she had initially imagined. In the weeks that followed, Lyra and Elena's coffee meetings became a regular occurrence. They discussed everything from the minutiae of cellular biology to the grand philosophies that shaped human cultures. Lyra found herself captivated not just by the information, but by Elena herself, the passion with which she spoke, the warmth of her smile, the depths of knowledge in her eyes. One evening, as they walked through the compound's gardens after another lengthy discussion, Lyra gathered her courage to ask a question that had been on her mind for days. "Elena," she began, her voice unusually hesitant, "I've learned so much about human reproduction and relationships from our talks and my research, but there's one aspect I still struggle to understand fully." Elena turned to her, curiosity evident in her expression. "What's that, Lyra?" "The physical sensations," Lyra said, her iridescent skin shimmering with what Elena had come to recognize as the Zarthani equivalent of a blush. "The pleasure you've described, I can't quite grasp it. In our species, physical contact is rare and utilitarian. The idea of it being pleasurable is foreign." Elena's eyes widened slightly, realizing the delicate nature of the conversation. "Well," she said carefully, "human physical intimacy involves a complex interplay of nerve endings, hormones, and emotional responses. It's not just about the physical sensations, but also the emotional connection and the vulnerability of sharing such an intimate experience with another person." Lyra nodded, processing the information. Then, with a determination that surprised them both, she asked, "Is it something that can be experienced between different species?" "Hypothetically, of course." The question hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken implications. Elena felt her heart rate quicken, aware of the dangerous territory they were entering. Hypothetically, Elena said slowly, I suppose it could be possible, given compatible physiologies, but it would be incredibly complex, both biologically and ethically. There would be many factors to consider. Lyra's multifaceted eyes seemed to glow in the twilight. I see, she said softly. Thank you for explaining. I find myself curious about many aspects of human experience, perhaps too curious. As they stood there in the garden, the air thick with unspoken thoughts and newfound tensions, both Lyra and Elena realized that their relationship had shifted into uncharted territory. The line between scientific inquiry and personal desire was blurring, leading them towards a future neither had anticipated. The gentle breeze carried the scent of Earth's flora, a constant reminder to Lyra of how far she was from home, and how close she felt to this new world and the human who was quickly becoming the center of her universe. Cultural exchange. The early morning sun cast a golden glow over the New York skyline as Lyra made her way to the Human-Alien Exchange Center. Her iridescent skin shimmered with excitement, reflecting her eagerness to delve deeper into human culture. Today marked the beginning of a more intensive cultural immersion program, and Lyra couldn't wait to experience humanity up close. As she entered the bustling center, her gaze immediately found Elena, who was chatting animatedly with a group of human and Zarthani scientists. The xenobiologist's eyes lit up when she spotted Lyra, and she quickly excused herself to greet her alien friend. Good morning, Lyra, Elena said warmly. Are you ready for your first day of true cultural immersion? Lyra nodded enthusiastically. More than ready. I've been looking forward to this since our conversation in the garden last week. A slight blush colored Elena's cheeks at the mention of their last encounter. Well, we've got a full day planned. We'll start with a visit to a local high school, then move on to a community center, and finish up at a popular restaurant. It should give you a good cross-section of daily human life. As they made their way to the high school, Lyra peppered Elena with questions about human education, social structures, and adolescent development. Elena answered patiently, her admiration for Lyra's curiosity growing with each thoughtful inquiry. The high school was a whirlwind of activity. Lyra observed with fascination as teenagers hurried through crowded hallways, gossiped by their lockers, and engaged in lively debates in classrooms. The range of emotions on display, from exuberant laughter to moody sullenness, was unlike anything she had ever seen among the more reserved Zarthani youth. During a biology class, Lyra was invited to speak about Zarthani physiology. The students listened with rapt attention, their questions revealing a mix of scientific curiosity and typical teenage obsessions. One bold student raised his hand and asked, how do Zarthani, make babies? Lyra glanced at Elena, who nodded encouragingly. Our reproduction process is quite different from yours, Lyra explained. We don't have physical intercourse as humans do. Instead, we undergo a process of energy transfer and genetic recombination. The class erupted in a mixture of fascinated murmurs and giggles. Lyra continued, her voice taking on a note of wonder. But I must say, the human method of reproduction seems far more interesting. The emotional connections you form, the physical sensations you experience, it's all quite remarkable to us. As the class ended and they made their way to the community center, Elena couldn't help but notice the thoughtful expression on Lyra's face. Penny for your thoughts, she asked, using the human idiom she had taught Lyra the week before. Lyra's multifaceted eyes seemed to shimmer with emotion. I'm just overwhelmed by the depth of human experiences. The way you young people navigate complex emotions, the importance you place on physical and emotional connections, it's all so different from my world. Elena nodded understanding. It can be a lot to take in, but that's what makes humanity so resilient and adaptable. Our emotions, while sometimes chaotic, are also our greatest strength. At the community center, Laura observed humans of all ages engaging in various activities, from art classes to fitness sessions to support group meetings. She was particularly moved by a group therapy session for couples struggling with relationship issues. The effort these humans put into maintaining their emotional bonds is astounding, Laura whispered to Elena as they watched the session from an observation room. On my world, if a pairing is not optimal, we simply dissolve it and move on. But humans, you fight for your connections. Elena smiled softly. Love makes us do crazy things sometimes, but it's also what drives us to be better, to grow, to evolve. As they listened to the couples share their struggles and triumphs, Laura felt a strange ache in her chest. She found herself imagining what it would be like to care for someone so deeply, to be willing to fight against all odds to maintain a connection. Her gaze drifted to Elena, and for a moment, she allowed herself to wonder. The day concluded with dinner at a popular Italian restaurant. Laura marveled at the array of flavors and textures, so different from the nutrient solutions Sci-Fi consumed. But more than the food, she was captivated by the atmosphere. Couples holding hands across tables, friends laughing over shared plates, families celebrating special occasions. This is more than just sustenance, Lyra observed, twirling pasta around her fork as Elena had shown her. It's communion. Elena nodded, pleased by Lyra's insight. Food is a big part of human culture. We use it to connect, to show love, to comfort ourselves and others. It's one of the many ways we express our emotions and strengthen our bonds. As they finished their meal, Laura found herself reluctant for the day to end. The immersion into human life had been overwhelming, exhilarating, and profoundly moving. She felt changed by the experience, as if she was seeing not just humanity, but herself in a new light. Helena, she said softly as they stepped out into the cool night air, thank you for today. I feel as though I'm beginning to understand humanity in a way I never could have from mere data and observations. Elena's warm smile sent an unfamiliar flutter through Lyra's being. I'm glad, the xenobiologist replied. And I have to thank you too, Lyra. Seeing our world through your eyes, it's helping me appreciate aspects of humanity I've always taken for granted. As they parted ways for the evening, both Lyra and Elena felt the subtle shift in their relationship. What had begun as a scientific exchange was blossoming into something deeper, more personal. Neither of them fully understood the implications of this change, but both felt a mix of excitement and apprehension about where their journey of cultural exchange might lead. Lyra returned to her quarters, her mind buzzing with new information and experiences. As she prepared for her rest cycle, she found herself revisiting moments from the day. The laughter of the high school students, the raw emotions of the couples in therapy, the warmth in Elena's eyes as she explained human customs. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Lyra felt a longing for something she couldn't quite name. It was more than scientific curiosity now. It was a desire to understand, to connect, to experience the depth of emotion that seemed to define humanity. As she drifted off to sleep, Lyra's last thoughts were of Elena, and the strange, wonderful sensations that arose whenever they were together. Little did she know that across the city, in her own apartment, Elena was experiencing similar thoughts and feelings, marking the beginning of a journey that would challenge both of their preconceptions about love, biology, and the boundaries between species. Unexpected feelings, weeks passed, and Lyra's immersion in human culture deepened. Each day brought new discoveries, not just about humanity, but about herself. She found herself looking forward to her time with Elena with an eagerness that both thrilled and confused her. One crisp autumn morning, Lyra and Elena set out for a day trip to a nearby nature reserve. The Sci-Fi had expressed curiosity about Earth's diverse ecosystems, and Elena thought a hands-on experience would be invaluable. As they hiked through the vibrant fall foliage, Lyra marveled at the explosion of colors around them. Her homeworld was largely monochromatic, and the riot of reds, oranges, and golds was breathtaking. It's beautiful, Lyra breathed, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the autumn hues. How do you ever get used to such wonder? Elena smiled, watching Lyra's reaction with fondness. Many of us don't. That's why we have poets, artists, and musicians to remind us of the beauty we might otherwise overlook. They paused at a scenic overlook, the forest stretching out before them in a tapestry of color. A cool breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the earthy scent of fall. "You know," Elena said softly, "there's an old human saying, to see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower." Lyra turned to her, curiosity shimmering in her eyes. "What does it mean?" "It's about finding wonder in the smallest things," Elena explained. "About seeing the interconnectedness of all life, all matter. I think it's something your people and mine have in common, this drive to understand the universe in all its complexity." As Elena spoke, Lyra felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a sensation she was beginning to associate with the human's presence. Without thinking, she reached out and took Elena's hand, marveling at the contrast between her iridescent skin and Elena's warm brown tone. Elena's breath caught at the unexpected contact, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she gently squeezed Lyra's hand, a gesture of comfort and connection that transcended species. They stood like that for a long moment, hand in hand, watching the play of light and shadow over the autumn landscape. Lyra felt a profound sense of peace, mixed with an exhilarating undercurrent of something else, something new and slightly frightening in its intensity. As they continued their hike, Lyra found herself hyper-aware of Elena's presence, the sound of her breathing, the grace of her movements, the warmth of her smile. She recalled their conversations about human love and attraction, and wondered if this was what it felt like. They stopped for a picnic lunch in a small clearing. As Elena unpacked the food, Lyra watched her, struck by a sudden realization. "Elena," she said, her voice slightly tremulous, "I think I'm experiencing something unexpected." Elena looked up, her dark eyes full of warmth and curiosity. "What is it, Lyra?" Lyra struggled to find the right words. "When I'm with you, I feel different, warm, like my insides are glowing. And I find myself thinking about you even when we're apart. Is this what humans call attraction?" Elena's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and something deeper flickering across her face. She set down the sandwich she'd been unwrapping and turned to face Lyra fully. "Lyra," she said gently, "what you're describing does sound like attraction, but it's complicated. We're different species, with different biologies and cultural backgrounds. And I'm a scientist. I have to be careful about maintaining professional boundaries." Lyra nodded, a hint of disappointment clouding her features. "I understand. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I wanted to understand what I was feeling." Elena reached out, gently touching Lyra's arm. "You haven't made me uncomfortable. In fact," she paused, seeming to wrestle with herself for a moment before continuing. "In fact, I've been experiencing similar feelings. But we need to be careful. There are ethical considerations, not to mention the potential diplomatic implications." Lyra's heart, or the Zarthani equivalent, soared at Elena's admission. "So what do we do?" Elena sighed, running a hand through her hair. "We proceed carefully. We need to think this through, consider all the implications. But for now, let's just enjoy this day together. Is that okay?" Lyra nodded, a smile brightening her iridescent features. "More than okay." As they finished their lunch and continued their hike, both Lyra and Elena felt a shift in their relationship. The air between them seemed charged with possibility, with unspoken words and unfamiliar emotions. They spent the rest of the day exploring the reserve, their conversation flowing easily between scientific observations and more personal topics. Lyra shared stories of her childhood on her homeworld, while Elena talked about her journey to becoming a xenobiologist. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of pink and orange, they made their way back to the transport that would take them to the city. Standing at the edge of the forest, they paused for a moment, neither quite ready for the day to end. "Thank you for this, Elena," Lyra said softly. "Not just for today, but for everything. You've opened up a whole new world to me, in more ways than one. Elena smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. You've done the same for me, Lyra. You've helped me see my own world, my own species, through new eyes. It's been extraordinary. Impulsively, Lyra leaned forward and pressed her forehead to Elena's, a gesture of deep affection among her people. Elena, understanding the significance, closed her eyes and leaned into the touch. For a moment, they stood there, forehead to forehead, two beings from different worlds finding connection in the fading light of an Earth sunset. It was a moment of perfect understanding, of bridges crossed and boundaries blurred. As they finally pulled apart and made their way to the transport, both Lyra and Elena knew that everything had changed. They were embarking on a journey into uncharted territory, personally, professionally, and perhaps even diplomatically. What lay ahead was uncertain, filled with potential challenges and unforeseen consequences. But in that moment, as they sat side by side watching the landscape blur past, both felt a sense of excitement and hope for what the future might hold. The boundaries between their worlds were beginning to dissolve, and in that dissolution, something new and beautiful was taking shape. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly, wonderfully human. Ethical dilemmas. The weeks following their day at the nature reserve were filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation for both Lyra and Elena. Their growing attraction to each other was undeniable, but it came with a host of complications that neither could ignore. One evening, they found themselves in Elena's office at the Xenobiology Research Center, ostensibly to discuss Lyra's latest findings on human social structures. However, the conversation quickly turned to more personal matters. "We need to talk about this," Elena said, her voice tinged with both affection and concern. "About us and what it means." Lyra nodded, her iridescent skin shimmering with nervous energy. "I agree. I've been doing research on interspecies relationships in human culture. It seems to be a topic of much debate and controversy." Elena couldn't help but smile at Lyra's ever-present thirst for knowledge. "You're right. It's a complex issue, even when we're just talking about relationships between different human cultures. Add in an entirely different species, and it becomes exponentially more complicated." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their situation hanging heavily between them. Finally, Lyra spoke, her voice soft but determined. "I understand the complications, Elena, but I can't deny what I feel for you. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced. Is it wrong for us to explore these feelings?" Elena sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's not about right or wrong, Lyra. It's about consequences. We need to consider the ethical implications. I'm a scientist tasked with studying your species. There are concerns about power dynamics, about the potential for exploitation, even if that's not our intent." Lyra's multifaceted eyes shimmered with emotion. "I am not some helpless subject, Elena. I am a scientist too. I am here of my own free will, making my own choices." "I know that," Elena said gently, "but others might not see it that way. And then there are the diplomatic considerations. What if our relationship were to somehow jeopardize the alliance between our species?" As they discussed the potential ramifications of their feelings, a knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Dr. Marcus Chen, the head of the Xenobiology department, entered the room. "Elena, Lyra, I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, his keen eyes taking in the tension in the room. "I wanted to discuss the upcoming interspecies conference. We'd like both of you to present your findings on cultural exchange." As Dr. Chen outlined the details of the conference, Lyra and Elena exchanged glances, acutely aware of the irony of their situation. They were being asked to present on cultural exchange while grappling with the most profound form of exchange imaginable. After Dr. Chen left, Elena turned to Lyra, her expression serious. "This conference, it's a reminder of our responsibilities. We have to be careful, Lyra. Our actions don't just affect us." Lyra nodded, her earlier determination tempered by the reality of their situation. "I understand, but Elena, I don't want to ignore what's happening between us. It feels important. not just personally, but perhaps for both our species. Elena reached out, gently taking Lyra's hand. The contact sent a shiver through both of them. I don't want to ignore it either, but we need to proceed with caution. Maybe we should talk to someone about this, someone who can offer an objective perspective. They agreed to seek counsel from Dr. Amelia Fontaine, an expert in xenopsychology who had been working with both humans and Zarthani since first contact. Dr. Fontaine listened to their situation with professional interest and personal compassion. What you're experiencing is not unprecedented, Dr. Fontaine explained. Throughout history, whenever different cultures have come into contact, individuals have formed deep bonds, sometimes romantic in nature. It's a natural part of cultural exchange. But is it ethical? Elena asked, voicing the concern that had been weighing on her. Dr. Fontaine considered the question carefully. Ethics are not always black and white, especially in unprecedented situations like this. The key is to ensure that both parties are fully informed, consenting, and aware of the potential consequences of their actions. She turned to Lyra. Lyra, do you feel that your feelings for Elena are influencing your scientific observations or your role as a cultural ambassador? Lyra shook her head emphatically. No. If anything, my feelings have deepened my commitment to understanding and bridging our cultures. Dr. Fontaine nodded, then addressed them both. My professional opinion is that as long as you both maintain transparency with your respective authorities and ensure that your personal relationship does not compromise your work, there are no ethical barriers to exploring your feelings for each other. As they left Dr. Fontaine's office, Lyra and Elena felt a mixture of relief and nervous anticipation. They had received a tentative green light, but the path ahead was still uncertain. So, Lyra said, her voice a mixture of hope and hesitation, where do we go from here? Elena took a deep breath, then smiled softly. We take it one day at a time. We continue our work, we maintain our integrity, and we see where this leads us. As they walked together through the bustling halls of the research center, their hands brushed against each other. Without hesitation, Lyra intertwined her iridescent fingers with Elena's. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. Two beings from different worlds, choosing to bridge the gap between them. As they stepped out into the warm sunshine, both Lyra and Elena felt a sense of possibility unfurling before them. They knew there would be challenges ahead, cultural misunderstandings, biological differences, and the scrutiny of both their species. But in that moment, walking hand in hand, they were ready to face whatever came their way. For in their connection, they saw the potential for something greater than themselves, a true understanding between species, a bridge across the cosmic divide. It was a daunting prospect, but also an exhilarating one. As the sun set over the city, casting a golden glow over the blended community of humans and Zarthani, Lyra and Elena stood at the forefront of a new frontier, not just in science or diplomacy, but in the very nature of love itself. Crisis and revelation. The interspecies conference was in full swing, with scientists, diplomats, and cultural experts from both Earth and Zarthan gathered to share knowledge and strengthen ties between their worlds. Lyra and Elena had just finished presenting their findings on cultural exchange to an enthusiastic audience when an urgent message arrived. Dr. Marcus Chen burst into the conference room, his face pale with concern. "We have a situation," he announced, his voice tight. "A previously unknown pathogen has been detected in the Zarthani delegation. It appears to be harmless to them, but it's having severe effects on humans who've been exposed." The room erupted in chaos as people began to panic. Lyra watched in horror as several human attendees collapsed, their bodies racked with fever and tremors. Elena sprang into action, her scientific training kicking in. "We need to establish a quarantine immediately," she ordered, taking charge of the situation. "All Zarthani delegates, please remain calm and stay where you are. Humans, we need to evacuate in an orderly fashion." As the crisis unfolded, Lyra felt a deep sense of guilt wash over her. Could she have unknowingly brought this pathogen to Earth? She approached Elena, her multifaceted eyes filled with concern. Elena, I'm so sorry. I never meant to. Elena cut her off with a gentle but firm gesture. This isn't your fault, Lyra. We've always known there were risks in interspecies contact. What matters now is how we handle this crisis. Over the next few days, the situation escalated. The pathogen spread rapidly among the human population, overwhelming hospitals and causing widespread panic. The Zarthani, immune to its effects, found themselves isolated and viewed with suspicion by some fearful humans. Lyra and Elena worked tirelessly alongside a team of human and Zarthani scientists, racing against time to understand the pathogen and develop a cure. Their unique bond and ability to bridge the gap between their species proved invaluable in the crisis. One night, as they pored over data in the makeshift lab, Lyra made a breakthrough. Elena, look at this, she exclaimed, pointing to a complex molecular structure on her screen. The pathogen's protein coat. It's similar to a harmless symbiotic organism on my world. What if we could use that similarity to create a vaccine? Elena's eyes lit up with hope. Lyra, that's brilliant. If we can synthesize a version of that symbiotic organism that's safe for humans, we might be able to train the human immune system to recognize and fight the pathogen. Their excitement was short-lived, however, as they realized the enormity of the task ahead. Creating such a vaccine would require extensive testing, and time was running out. We need volunteers, Elena said, her voice heavy with the weight of what she was suggesting. Human volunteers to test the vaccine. It's risky, but it might be our only chance. Without hesitation, Elena rolled up her sleeve. I'll do it. I'll be the first volunteer. Lyra felt a surge of fear and admiration. Elena, no, it's too dangerous. We don't know what effects it might have. Elena took Lyra's hand, her eyes filled with determination. This is what humans do, Lyra. We take risks. We push boundaries. It's how we've survived and thrived. And right now, it's how we'll save lives. Lyra marveled at Elena's courage, seeing in that moment the true strength of humanity. It wasn't just their scientific knowledge or technological advancements that made them remarkable. It was their willingness to sacrifice for others, to face the unknown with bravery and hope. As Elena prepared to receive the experimental vaccine, Lyra felt a profound shift in her understanding of humans. She had come to Earth to study them, but in this crisis, she was learning more than she ever could have imagined. The next few days were tense as they monitored Elena's response to the vaccine. Lyra barely left her side, her own research forgotten as she focused all her energy on supporting Elena and continuing their work on the cure. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they had their answer. The vaccine worked. Elena's immune system had successfully fought off the pathogen, and her body was producing antibodies that could be used to create a cure for others. As news of the breakthrough spread, Lyra watched in awe as humans around the world stepped up to help. Volunteers flooded testing centers, scientists worked around the clock to produce the cure, and communities came together to support those affected by the outbreak. In the midst of the crisis, the true nature of humanity shone through, their resilience, their compassion, and their unwavering spirit in the face of adversity. As the pandemic began to recede, Lyra and Elena found a quiet moment alone. Exhausted but triumphant, they stood on the balcony of the research center, watching the city come back to life. I've never seen anything like this, Lyra said softly. The way your people came together, the risks you were willing to take for each other, it's extraordinary. Elena smiled, leaning into Lyra's embrace. It's who we are. We're not perfect, far from it. But when it really matters, we show up for each other. It's how we've survived all this time. Lyra felt a swell of emotion. I came here to study humans, but I feel like I'm only now beginning to understand you. And I love what I'm discovering. Elena turned to face Lyra, her eyes shining with unshed tears. And we're only just beginning to understand your people. This crisis, as terrible as it was, It's shown us how much we can achieve when we work together." As they stood there, the setting sun painting the sky in vibrant hues, Lyra and Elena knew that their journey was far from over. The crisis had changed everything, revealing new depths to their relationship and to the potential for true cooperation between their species. In the face of adversity, they had discovered the true strength of humanity, and in doing so, had laid the foundation for a future where the boundaries between worlds could truly dissolve. New understandings. In the months following the pathogen crisis, Earth and Zarthan found themselves more closely linked than ever before. The collaborative effort to overcome the pandemic had forged new bonds of trust and respect between the two species. Lyra and Elena, at the heart of this new era of cooperation, found themselves thrust into the spotlight as symbols of interspecies unity. On a crisp autumn morning, much like the day of their fateful hike, Lyra and Elena stood before a mixed audience of humans and Zarthani at the newly established Interstellar Cooperation Summit. Elena stepped up to the podium first, her voice clear and confident. "A year ago, we faced a crisis that threatened to drive our species apart. Instead, it brought us closer together. We learned that our differences are not barriers, but bridges to greater understanding and innovation." Lyra joined her, her iridescent skin shimmering under the lights. "Through this experience, we've discovered that the true strength of both our species lies not just in our individual capabilities, but in our ability to connect, to empathize, and to work together towards common goals." As they presented their findings on the benefits of interspecies collaboration, Lyra couldn't help but reflect on her personal journey. She had come to Earth as an observer, a scientist studying an alien species. Now she stood before them as a partner, a friend, and something more, a bridge between worlds. After the presentation, as they mingled with the attendees, Dr. Amelia Fontaine approached them, a warm smile on her face. "You two have done remarkable work," she said. "Your relationship has opened up new avenues of research in xenopsychology and interspecies communication." Elena blushed slightly, still not entirely comfortable with being the subject of scientific inquiry. "We're just doing our best to navigate uncharted territory," she said. "That's precisely what makes it so valuable," Dr. Fontaine replied. "You're pioneers, showing us all what's possible when we open our hearts and minds to new experiences." As the day wound down, Lyra and Elena found themselves in a quiet corner of the conference center's garden. The setting sun painted the sky in hues reminiscent of their first outing together, bringing a flood of memories. "It's hard to believe how much has changed," Lyra mused, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the vibrant colors of the sunset. "When I first arrived on Earth, I thought I understood what it meant to study another species, but I never imagined." Elena took her hand, a gesture that had become so natural between them. "You never imagined you'd fall in love with one of the subjects of your study," she teased gently. Lyra's skin shimmered with what Elena now recognized as the Zarthani equivalent of a blush. "I never imagined I'd discover a whole new understanding of what love can be," she said softly. "Human emotions are so intense, so complex. It's been overwhelming at times, but also incredibly beautiful." Elena nodded, understanding perfectly. "And I never thought I'd find myself questioning everything I thought I knew about biology, about the nature of attraction and compatibility. You've expanded my world in ways I never dreamed possible." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Each point of light represented potential new worlds, new species to meet and understand. "Where do we go from here?" Lyra asked, her voice a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Elena squeezed her hand gently. "We keep exploring, keep learning. There's still so much we don't understand about each other, about the universe, but we'll face it together." Lyra nodded, her heart full of hope and determination. "Together," she agreed. "Not just you and I, but our species. We've only scratched the surface of what we can achieve when we combine our knowledge, our perspectives, our strengths." As they made their way back to the conference center, they passed a group of young human and Zarthani students engaged in animated conversation. The sight filled them both with a sense of optimism for the future. "You know," Elena said, "when I was a little girl dreaming of alien life, I never imagined it quite like this. I thought of strange creatures, incomprehensible and possibly dangerous. I never considered that we'd be so similar in the ways that truly matter." Lyra finished for her. Elena nodded. "Exactly. Different biologies, different cultures, but at our core, the desire to learn, to connect, to love, we're not so different after all." As they rejoined the conference, ready to face whatever challenges and discoveries the future might hold, Lyra and Elena knew that their journey was far from over. They had opened a door to new possibilities, not just for themselves, but for both their species. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential obstacles and misunderstandings, but they faced it with courage, curiosity, and an unshakable belief in the power of connection across the cosmic divide. In their love, in their work, and in the new era of cooperation they had helped usher in, Lyra and Elena embodied the very best of what both their species could be. They were living proof that even in the vast expanse of the universe, hearts could find each other, minds could meet, and different worlds could come together in harmony. As the stars twinkled overhead, silent witnesses to this new chapter in the story of two worlds, Lyra and Elena stood hand in hand, ready to write the next pages together. The end of this chapter was just the beginning of a greater story, one of unity, discovery, and love that transcended the boundaries of worlds and species. In their journey, they had not only found each other but had also illuminated a path forward for both their peoples, a future bright with the promise of understanding, cooperation, and endless possibilities.